Good afternoon, and welcome to this panel. I'm very excited about this topic, and thanks so much for asking me to moderate. So the topic of this panel is consumer affordability in the energy transition. And to just kind of lay out how we're going to go about doing this, each speaker is going to talk for about approximately 7 to 9 minutes. And then we'll open it up to questions, and I'm really hoping that that all of you will be engaged and that we could have a discussion around this topic. So I'm not going to go through bios. You have them all there on your table, and I encourage you to read them. So we're going to start with Monica.
Great. Thank you so much. Runa, I do have a presentation, if we could have that brought up. Thank you so much. And wanted to thank I've got it. Thank you for your concern, Francis. I appreciate that. I want to thank Electricity Canada for the opportunity to be here today. Really appreciate it. So, so we're talking about consumer affordability on this panel. I think one thing I just want to note before we get started is like, hooray, an all-female panel. I don't know what those are called, but I'm delighted that to see such great female leaders on the stage. That's wonderful. So I wanted to just, for those of you who don't know me, tell you a little bit about positive energy. So my name is Monica Gattinger. As was noted, I'm a professor at the University of Ottawa, and I lead a research and engagement program there called Positive Energy. And so our focus is on how to build and maintain public and investor confidence in energy and climate decision making. So we use the convening power of the university to bring together leaders from business, government, Indigenous organizations, civil society groups, and researchers. And then we undertake solution-focused applied academic research. One of the parts of our work program that I find the most interesting is a wonderful partnership that we have with Nanos Research, so with Nick at Nanos, around public opinion survey research. So we've been keeping our finger on the pulse of Canadians' attitudes around energy and climate issues. So I'm going to share with you today some of our findings on the affordability side, and then end with a few questions about sort of what does this mean for the role of regulators. So here we go. What do Canadians think about climate issues and affordability? And most of these slides are going to focus on affordability, but I'll start with something on climate because I think it's useful for kind of backdrop. So we've been, and I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because we only have a relatively short period of time for the opening remarks, but happy to have this presentation circulated by Electricity to Canada to anybody who is interested. So we've been tracking Canadians' what we call ambition, climate ambition, for the last number of years. And so we asked Canadians on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 means now is the worst possible time, and 10 means now is the best possible time, how good of a time is it for Canada to be ambitious in addressing climate change, and we throw in a trade-off. So we say even if there are costs to the economy. And as you can see from the results here, for the most part, the numbers hold really quite steady, with a good majority, certainly over the last little while, a good majority of Canadians saying now is the best time. And I think it's important to bear in mind this is as we've gone through affordability crisis, as we've gone through war in Ukraine, et cetera, that we've got really, I think, really solid support from Canadians in terms of climate action. But that's wearing their hat as a citizen. And so we wanted to start to dive into what about when we start asking people wearing their hat as a consumer, what do they think about energy and climate? So this is the stuff where it starts to get a little more concerning. So we've started asking people not that long ago, I guess a couple of years ago now, their level of concern for energy prices over the next 6 months. And so we say again on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you're not at all concerned, 10 is you're the most concerned. How concerned are you for energy prices for the things you are likely to be purchasing over the course of the next 6 months? And so you can see here, concern has come down a little bit over the course of the last couple of years. We're actually in the field right now. I'm very curious to see what the results are going to be for this latest iteration of the tracking. But you can see that, in essence, close to two-thirds or close to two-thirds of Canadians are actually concerned about what they're going to pay for energy over the course of the next 6 months. And interestingly, if you split it out to the proportion of people who answered each number all the way up to 10, fully a third of Canadians score their level of concern a 10 on 10. That is an awful lot of people who are very concerned about energy affordability. So definitely something that we're keeping a close eye on. The other thing we've been starting to ask Canadians about, and we're in the field again on this one, we'll be asking it again right now, to ask Canadians about, and we just had this panel about reliability, now we've got a panel on affordability. So we've been asking Canadians about what they see to rank various attributes of energy and how important they think they are for Canadians over the course of the next 5 years. So you can see on the slide here, affordability, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, reliability, and safety. And in the number one position, the greatest proportion of people answer affordability. I think, again, really important to bear in mind. The next greatest proportion of people answering number one for these attributes is lowering greenhouse gas emissions. But what I think is quite interesting about this slide is if you look within each of those categories, and you look at the proportion of people who are ranking them number one versus number two versus number three versus number four, you see that for affordability, the greatest proportion of people rank at number one. Lowering greenhouse gas emissions, what do the greatest proportion of people rank it at? The largest proportion is number four. Very interesting finding. Reliability, greatest proportion, number two. Safety, greatest proportion, number three. So again, I think very important backdrop for this conversation in terms of sort of how do people trade off and see the ranking of these attributes. We're very interested, and I think Electricity Canada probably is interested in how people are thinking about electrification. So I'm going to go over this super quick, but happy to answer more questions in the discussion period. So we've been asking people, and again, we're in the field on this right now, so I'm just like really excited to see what comes out for the most recent round of tracking, but their level of interest in transitioning to electricity. So we ask them, which of the following statements best represents your opinion? I am not interested in transitioning. So we've got about a quarter of Canadians who answer that way. Interesting. I am interested in transitioning but haven't started yet. About 4 in 10 Canadians answer that way. I am interested in transitioning and have taken steps to do so. About a quarter of people. I am interested in transitioning and have done all that I plan to do. So just a little under 1 in 10 Canadians. And so when we ask them why do they respond the way that they did, it's very interesting to see that, again, this is an open-ended question that we ask them, and people are coming forward with what I think are very pragmatic concerns. They're concerned about issues of, cost. They're concerned about issues of reliability. They're concerned about, sort of uncertain technologies. Do I trust these new technologies? So there's some hesitance there. I think, again, really important for governments and regulators, folks in this room, to take into consideration. Then we ask, and I'm almost at the end here, then we ask, so how are governments doing? We want folks to really score government performance on a variety of energy and climate issues. I'll just share with you, for purposes of our discussion today, the job done by governments in Canada in ensuring energy is affordable as we work to meet our climate change commitments. So we add that in. This is about, really thinking about affordability in the context of transition. And so you can see that, sort of the poor, very poor scores. People are given very good, good, average, poor, very poor. The very good, good is definitely in the minority. Most people, of the areas there, most people are responding in the poor, very poor category. Now, one thing I would say about this is we ask Canadians to score government performance across a whole range of issues, and these are actually pretty good scores compared to what we see on some of the other questions that we ask. So, again, there is hard to see that as optimistic, but it absolutely is the case that in terms of Canadians scoring government performance on affordability, to date, they're doing relatively well, and those figures, as we see, have held pretty steady and, in fact, actually improved to some extent. So what does all of this mean in terms of the role of the regulator when we think about affordability? And I think, one of the big questions for me, my background is in public policy. I'm often thinking about, what is the role of government? What is the role of policymakers versus regulators? And, the flip side of affordability is cost. Right? This is going to cost. We all know this is going to cost. The last panel was talking about that to quite a degree. Now, I think, from the perspective of the research that we've done at Positive Energy, one of the biggest questions that, in our view, could use more attention is who pays for what, when do they pay for it, and how do they pay for it, right? So when we think about who, is it the ratepayer? Is it the taxpayer? Is it investors? Is it consumers writ large? When we think about what are the pieces? Are we talking about reliability? Are we talking about electrification? Are we talking about EVs, heat pumps, take your pick? When do they pay for it? Is it paid for now? Is it paid for in the future? And then how do they pay for it? Is this through some sort of a tax incentive, government program, et cetera? And I think you could ask this question across virtually any aspect of energy transition that involves the electricity system and have a very interesting conversation. Because many of the costs, and this is where my mind goes to this as somebody who's interested in policy, many of the costs are within regulators' remit, but many of the costs are actually beyond regulators' remit, right? So think about carbon pricing. Thinking about electricity system decarbonization. Some of those costs are within regulatory remit, some of them are not. Think about end-use equipment. Runa and I were talking about, EVs, heat pumps. There's a variety of pieces of the energy transition, only some of which are within the remit of regulators. The role of regulators is crucial, absolutely. Rate design has been talked about already. The whole question that was raised in the previous panel, integrated planning across the gas and electricity systems, there regulators can play an absolutely essential role. New models, distributed energy resources, distribution system operators, all these areas where, again, regulators are playing a really important role, et cetera. But regulators are not the only players, and I think this is where I want to pick up on something that Francis said, which is, what's the broader public policy agenda, and how does that then interface with the role of regulators, and do we have alignment between regulatory decision-making and the broader policy framework? And I don't have an answer for that necessarily, but I think it's a question that merits some consideration. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to discussion.
Thanks, Monica, and thank you to Electricity Canada for the opportunity to speak today, and especially for printing out my speaking notes in triple extra large font so I can see them without my reading glasses. I note the slide deck is not working. I'm not sure if anything can be done about that. Nope, wrong deck. And I should also say that the opinions expressed today are mine alone, and they shouldn't necessarily be attributed to McCarthy Tétrault. Thanks very much for the slide deck. So we heard from Monica that Canadians want energy transition. They want GHG emissions reduction, but only if it's reasonably affordable. And given everything we heard at the first session this morning, regulators continue to be under significant pressure to keep customer costs down at a time, as we've heard through the balance of the Camp Hood conference, when more capital expenditure is required than any other time in recent history, not only to maintain existing grid resiliency and reliability, but to also facilitate grid upgrades and expansions that are necessary to achieve our federal decarbonization goals and other sustainability objectives. So given these challenges, or the trifecta as it's commonly referred to, how can we maintain or foster consumer affordability? So today I'd like to offer my view on 3 potential approaches. Oh, can I have the slide, please? Okay, thank you. First, market mechanisms. So as we know, Alberta, and we heard this from the question a little while ago with the panel right before us, Alberta has recently announced its REM. It's planned to design and implement a restructured or enhanced energy market. And part of that includes implementation of negative pricing, as well as curbing for the first time economic withholding by way of price caps for larger market participants once a prescribed threshold is reached. And that prescribed threshold is based on a reference natural gas unit set out in the regulations. This is not dissimilar to the market power mitigation framework that is part of Ontario's broader market renewal program that is currently being implemented, which entails working with individual market participants by technology type to establish appropriate reference prices and quantities for the purpose of facilitating ex ante and ex post offer and bid evaluation by the system operator. Second, competition, competition, competition. So recent examples of competitive procurements include, in Ontario, for example, the expedited LT1 and its successor LT1 procurements, as well as the BC Hydropower Call and the Hydro-Quebec First Solar RFP. These types of competitive procurements are expected to continue into the next decade, at least in Ontario, by way of long 20-year term contracts and medium 5-year term contracts for both capacity and energy to address forecasted increasing demand driven primarily by expected population growth and electrification. So as technological capabilities continue to evolve, in my view, these types of procurements can be tweaked to expand eligibility and foster more competition. Ontario's LT1, for example, was expanded from its predecessor expedited iteration to include a minimum target and stream for battery storage. And this was a huge boon for lithium battery. The pending LT2, upcoming LT2, is expected to be expanded to include repowered facilities, as well as a separate bespoke pathway for long lead time supply resources. This could be a great option for new entrant technologies, such as long-duration energy storage, or LDES, and compressed air energy storage systems. We heard Monica speak a little bit about DERs and a potential DSO model. Competition is also being introduced at that level by way of EDRs, distributed energy resources. And we see now, and I think there was a reference to CBAs earlier by Brendan, cost-benefit analyses, where at least larger utilities are being required to provide more detailed costing and feasibility evidence for non-wires alternatives for large-scale supply and transmission development and expansion. And again, in the context of CBAs, we can see that trickling down to the distribution level. This approach does have the potential to mitigate against rate volatility. Having said that, we do need to keep in mind that that approach needs to be contrasted with our current environment of increased material costs, as well as post-pandemic global supply chain issues and increased soft costs, such as labor for energy project design, development, and construction. Third, direct government intervention. In Ontario, we have recently seen the case of the Ontario Energy Board's decision in Enbridge Gas, where that decision is being stayed pending the government's implementation of Bill 165, whereby the provincial government will have, amongst other things, the express ability to create regulations that set the applicable revenue horizon for the purpose of determining natural gas customer contributions in aid of construction, albeit subject to the regulations also providing an opportunity for the board to hold its own hearing in the matter, in which case the adjudicated decision will prevail. But going back to Monica's last theme of misalignment between policy and regulation, we see that this has had the effect of delaying decarbonization goal achievement. And in my view, I don't think that this type of government intervention, which effectively overrules regulatory decision-making on an ex post basis, is an appropriate way to address consumer affordability. Instead, and as we heard a couple of days ago, it would be arguably more helpful for the government to provide regulators with express rules or direction that they can turn to and rely on in their decisions, demonstrating that government policy has been considered as part of the decision-making process. And really, the final product of Bill 165 will be just that. In my view, better methods of government intervention to keep ratepayer costs down include taxpayer assistance, such as the recent announcement of the federal guaranteed loan program for eligible Indigenous partnerships, coupled with similar programs already available in certain provinces, including Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario, which we heard about at length yesterday by MLI. To take another example, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we see the federal government backstopping the cost overruns for Muskrat Falls and the Labrador Island Link projects, which continue to accumulate in a deferral account pending the finalization of the rate mitigation plan by the governments and customer rate setting by the Public Utilities Board. While customer rate uncertainty continues to exist, at least the projects are able to begin commercial operation in the interim, again, for the purpose of progressing through energy transition. Jana, I'll turn it over to you now.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right, let's see if my slides are here. I'll give you a second back there. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. For those of us who haven't met, I'm Jana Mosley, and I'm the president of ENMAX Power here in Calgary. And thank you, Francis and team, for inviting me to bring a utility perspective to the conversation today. I'm not sure I'm going to share anything that hasn't been discussed after 3 days of discussing the energy transition and the challenges and opportunities that face us, but I'll certainly kick us off in terms of a conversation there. And it is certainly a challenge. We've heard about how policy and regulation are not necessarily aligned, and then here we are as the utilities and the last connection to the customer, trying to meet our customers' demands and execute on what policymakers want to try to achieve and follow what regulators require us to follow. And so it is a challenge right now to figure out how to weave through this. But just before I jump in, for those who are not familiar with ENMAX, we are a leading supplier of energy across the full value chain. We're headquartered here in Calgary. We have ENMAX Energy, which generates and retails electricity. We're the largest retailer of electricity here in the province, and we also retail natural gas. We have ENMAX Power, which is our transmission and distribution business that owns and operates transmission distribution assets here in the city of Calgary. We also own Versant Power, which is a T&D utility in the state of Maine. And then, as I already mentioned, our retail business with the end user, with our customer. So within ENMAX, we, like everyone else, we're adapting to the changes and the needs of our customers and trying to lead the way as best we can in this energy transition. For us, our customers are at the center of everything that we do. They trust us to safely and reliably provide this vital service that we all count on each and every day. And they're telling us what they're looking for, and we're seeing a growing demand for different energy solutions, from electrical vehicle adoption and solar panel installations. And it's also mixed with a bunch of other concerns and priorities that Monica shared with us across Canada and what they're seeing from their data. The investments that we make and the path that we take through the energy transition to enable a resilient grid that is positioned to enable future customer needs while keeping affordability in mind is what we're here to talk about today. From generation to transmission and distribution to every step in the energy value chain, we must optimize and minimize cost without compromising quality and reliability, and this is a challenge. This means embracing new technologies, streamlining our operations, and maximizing the existing grid to ensure we're managing the impact on rates for customers. Customers should always be at the core of our decision-making as we balance affordability, reliability, and sustainability. We want to bring them on the journey with us through this energy transition by being transparent and honest so customers understand and can support the investments that are required to move us forward into a lower carbon future. As utility providers, we need to partner and be viewed as these trusted advisors to the regulatory bodies that we work with. I'm going to touch on 3 points in my remarks today: timing, education, and partnering. And I think each of these are noteworthy highlights for us to all think about as we're tackling this challenge together. So let's start with timing. We've heard the conversation. We're all in many of these conferences. I think we all recognize that the time to align is now. We have an opportunity here, both in Canada and particularly in Alberta, to, one, learn from others who've gone before us, who've had more of a burning platform to get there sooner and faster. And we also have that opportunity in terms of just the amount of land that's available to us and what we're seeing around population and demand. So we are going to see this come and hit us, and it's happening across our country, but we do have the luxury of trying to do this very well if we agree to get to the table together and partner, collaborate, but act at the same time. So we all know electricity is an essential service, and as technologies and societal values change, it's going to become more prevalent and necessary for our modern lives. We're going to be relying on electricity more and more as we electrify. I learned a new word recently, and the word is exabyte. And an exabyte is a billion bytes. And Google's chairman says there were 5 exabytes of information created between the dawn of civilization through 2003. But that much information, 5 exabytes, is now created every 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
It's substantial every 2 days. So when you think about what that's driving in terms of demand and load, we were all thinking about cryptocurrency and what that was going to drive in terms of demand on our system. Just our use of the iPhone and all the data that comes with that in our daily lives, and then what we're all relying and will rely on AI to do, is driving incredible needs for computing power that is just exponentially going to skyrocket the demand on our system. This technology, electrification, is driving the need to invest across the full energy value chain, and there's no doubt about that. At the same time, though, we know that affordability continues to top the mind for our customers. 3/4 of Albertans are concerned about paying their home energy bills, and research shows that customers in Alberta are most concerned with their electricity company offering competitive prices for services, followed by them being reliable and dependable. Affordability for customers is something that stretches across the entire value chain. As a generator, retailer, and wires provider, ENMAX is uniquely positioned in Alberta to support customers at each stage of the affordability life cycle and to support regulators and policymakers in this discussion. And we can learn from others. We heard from Craig earlier today that when we look at what the regulator in the UK, Ofgem, is encouraging utilities to explore as part of their role in the energy transition, there is a lot for us to learn. The capacity of some of the UK utilities to create capacity on their distribution system, to leverage advanced control systems and the resources connected to their system in an automated way, it can add up to hundreds of megawatts, avoiding the need for higher supply capacity, avoiding wire investment or deferring that investment, or avoiding the need to load shed in system adequacy events, something that we're seeing more and more of here in the province of Alberta. Distribution system operations, or distribution network operations, depending on how you think of it, regardless of where we finally land in our energy markets, has much to offer to contribute to how we electrify in a cost-effective way and give our customers more say and control while ensuring reliability. We need to leverage this opportunity. At ENMAX Power, in our T&D business, we're continuing to advance our planning and operations to maximize the use of the existing grid. I think that's key, and we heard that earlier from Francis as well. We've got to maximize the grid that's there. Our customers are already paying for this grid, so let's use it to our fullest capability. Demand-side management, enabling larger distributed energy resources, and balancing load on the system are key tools in our toolkit that we must unleash. We are currently advocating for the development of a demand-side management framework here in Alberta with the aim of reducing customer demand through energy efficiency investments and programs that encourage customers to shift and avoid high-demand periods on the distribution system. To support these efforts, ENMAX is a member of the Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance and have partnered with utilities from across the province. Our objective is to study DSM in Alberta and identify initiatives for electric and gas distributors in rural and urban markets. As we've heard during the Campus conference, there is an opportunity to optimize both gas and electricity to serve the system demands of the future. In 2003, ENMAX conducted several pilots or programs to address energy affordability. My colleagues in ENMAX Energy have taken a leadership role in the utility industry to introduce several programs to support vulnerable customers. They include the flexibility to set a billing date during the month. That can go a long way to helping customers have more control over their budgets. This can be especially important for those who are on fixed incomes and can minimize missed or late payments. The Equalized Payment Program, which helps with the predictability of monthly utility bills, particularly during high energy usage months, by allowing customers to establish a single payment amount over a 12-month period at no additional cost, has received a lot of positive feedback from our customers. And then we also went forward with a load limiter pilot. So when customers struggle with energy affordability, ENMAX does not automatically disconnect residential customers for non-payment. We have customers who are in arrears placed on a load limiter, and that keeps the power flowing, but limits the amount of power that they're able to use in their home to essential services. And then they're able to work out a payment plan. We've found that on average, customers who have been placed on a load limiter are back to full power in 3 days because they have been able to figure out how to prioritize paying that bill, and we didn't have to go through the full process of disconnecting them and then the costs that are associated with reconnecting them later. We need to ensure that everyone is able to afford to power their homes and their businesses through this energy transition, and there are lots of innovative ways we can do that. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was education. So we need to be talking to customers about sustainability, reliability, and affordability. When we look at what we're hearing from customers, we see that there is a real opportunity and a need for conversation and education. Affordability is important to us and our customers, but so is sustainability and reliability, like we all know so well. It's the backbone of our electric infrastructure. Transitioning to a sustainable, reliable energy future requires significant upfront investment in infrastructure and technology, investments that constrain the financial resources of utilities and ultimately our customers. It will be vital for us as electricity providers to begin this conversation with our customers so that they can understand why costs continue to rise, the effect it will have on their bottom line in the future, and how utilities will turn those rates and fees into investments in infrastructure that will support customers and their energy needs long into the future. For example, in 2003, through research, we estimate that while customers who will generally pay more for their home energy needs, my apologies, in 2035, not 2003, will generally pay more for their home energy needs. Costs will vary based on choices made toward electrification. A customer, for example, who adopts electrification will consume more electricity, but pay just 19% more in energy than a customer who does not embrace electrification, who will pay 56% more for energy costs. And this is due to the savings that the customer who adopted electrification will see on carbon tax and fuel. So we really do need to be looking at understanding the total cost of ownership or total cost of energy usage, and how utilities, customers, and regulators need to understand that so that we can be looking at this in a holistic way. So how do we work with regulators so that we can all stay ahead of this and avoid letting the fear of affordability prevent us from moving forward to a cleaner energy future? That's where partnering comes in. So partnering with regulators in service of customers and companies who do things better than we do as traditional utilities to ensure we are investing in cost-effective ways and are focused on the value proposition we have as utilities. Regulators will play a crucial role in shaping how the electricity industry moves forward for a cleaner energy future. As Francis shared, the utility industry must come up with solutions and work closely with our regulators and policymakers to bring sustainability and reliability goals of policymakers to life. We also need to implement solutions in our existing grid to encourage efficiency, distributed generation, and enable increasing electrification. At ENMAX, we're pursuing pilot projects in all of these areas. The focus is for us to have this clean, reliable energy with affordability and customer in mind. Each province has a different regulatory framework that dictates how much and how fast Canadian utilities can invest in grid infrastructure and the technology that they have as the landscape changes. Recently, we've been seeing regulatory decisions that are creating some hurdles to investment in distribution grids and will not allow utilities to spend money in advance of the expected changes in electricity usage. This will challenge our journey towards full electrification and hold us back as Canadians. Currently, Calgary, yes, we can manage the incoming electric vehicles and growth in solar panels, but we expect we could see issues arising in the future that will hinder the adoption of electrification and will impact the reliability levels we've been able to deliver and that our customers expect. At ENMAX Power alone, the number of distributed energy resources connecting to the grid have skyrocketed, nearly doubling last year's requests in just the first half of this year, and this has been going on for the last decade. We know our customers are interested and eager to electrify their lives. Looking to the future, electricity providers and enablers of the energy transition, we want to work collaboratively with our regulators to ensure they have all the information that they need so that we can be successful meeting our customers where they are at. It is going to take trust and it is going to take conversation. So as I wrap up, I just want to acknowledge that the challenges that are facing the electricity industry are daunting, but the opportunities are equally exciting. By balancing affordability, reliability, and sustainability, and again, that they're not always going to be equally balanced, across this whole value chain, we can build a brighter, more resilient future for generations to come. But it will require courage, collaboration, and a willingness to have tough conversations. Together, we can shape the energy transition so it meets our customers' expectations by providing reliable, sustainable electricity now and into the future. The time is now. The conversation requires education, and partnering is the secret sauce. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, Reena, and Jana, for your thoughts. So why don't we open it up to some questions. I have a burning one, so maybe I could ask that one first, or I'm hoping I can ask that first. So, Monica, you talked quickly about who pays for what, when, and how. And one of the things that you mentioned was greater exchange between policymakers and regulators. And I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, sure. I think maybe just a couple of thoughts to get us started. I think it really is important to have, the policy direction, whether it's on the future of natural gas in the, province of Ontario, or, the variety of energy transition topics, to really give that, the what of where things are going, that then the regulators can work on the how component of it. And, one of the areas, as somebody who's studied policy and regulation for quite some time, is that I think sometimes we have interpreted regulatory independence, which is absolutely essential. I mean, I'm big on regulatory independence, but I think sometimes we've interpreted it in a way that maybe is perhaps a little too broad. And so absolutely, we don't want governments, getting engaged in the adjudicative role of regulators. But there is a tremendous wealth of expertise and knowledge within regulatory agencies that, in my view, could be brought to bear, much more effectively into policy development, and help us perhaps to get more alignment on policy decisions that are taken by governments, and the regulatory realities that we have. And I think there is, maybe just a concrete example. Jana, you were mentioning about the need to share with consumers that maybe their total electricity bill might go up, but their total energy bill might actually go down depending upon their choices. I think that's an area where there's a really important role for policymakers there. I don't think it's regulators that need to carry that message, but I think policymakers potentially can play a very important role to get some of those really foundational messages out to people. I think there are a variety of areas where that messaging, to help people understand what is coming towards them and how can they prepare for it in terms of their choices, can be really, really valuable. That then helps to smooth the way in terms of some of the regulatory decision making.
Thanks, Monica. Did you want to?
I actually take a different view. I think that there should be more consultation between end users or utilities and actually the government, and not necessarily. And I don't at all disagree with the fact that there's a wealth of expertise within regulators or regulatory tribunals. But I think to the extent that that expertise is brought to the hearing room, I think it needs to be limited to tribunal counsel, if you will. But I think it has to be limited to that role, because going back to the point of regulatory independence, it's almost more of a procedural independence. And I think it was, I don't know if Brendan's still in the room or not, but I think he had said a couple of days ago that, and I had kind of alluded to this in my remarks as well, is that regulators need those clear rules and direction. They need to be able to point to it when they rely on the underlying motivations or policies to support their decision making. And when you don't have that express alignment, say between government policy and regulatory rules or legislative mandates, you get into certain circumstances that I spoke to about earlier. So I agree in more consultation, but I actually don't necessarily agree that the regulator should be in the middle of it. I think it should almost be taking place around it. But again, my views are my own and don't necessarily express my organization. So,
Jana, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, questions. Okay. Could you introduce yourself too?
Yeah, my name's Robert Gabor. I'm the chair of the Public Utilities Board of Manitoba. And before I did this, I was a lawyer for almost 40 years. So I'm a regulator and I'm confused. Here's the confusion. I hear at this conference and the previous one words like partnering with regulators, collaborating with regulators, and the speaker just made what I think was an important point. I'm an adjudicator, okay? We have hearings, they're formal hearings. I have the same powers as a judge. This idea that I'm going to be partnering with somebody who's appearing before me just isn't going to fly. Because there can't be, we have a duty to be fair and impartial. And if we're meeting with utilities or we're meeting with private companies, we have end users who are wondering what's going on. The concept, which I think Monica raised, which is a valuable concept, is if you break the adjudicative part from the staff resource part, that's possible as long as the staff doesn't try and influence the decision makers. But you know, I'm hearing this all around, and it sort of started swirling about a year ago when you know, energy policies are coming forward. Well, we need to get the utilities together with the DSM companies and with the regulators. And I just keep going, well, if the government wants to talk to me and they want to talk to other people, that's fine. But I'm not going in a room with parties that are going to appear before me 6 months later. Because what's going to happen is, the potential is, we're going to have a hearing, and I'm going to ask the president of a company, why did you go in this direction? And the president's going to say, do you remember being in a meeting with me 6 months ago and you said this and we agreed on that? That doesn't happen. What's important is the confidence the public has in the process. And that's the key thing in this. They have to have confidence in the energy companies, they have to have confidence in the government, they have to have confidence in the regulator. And if that public trust is lost, then we've got a lot bigger problem.
Can I just say I fully agree with everything that's been said, and if I stated anything that suggested the opposite, I don't think I used the word partner, so maybe it wasn't directed at me, but so just wanted to clarify. Wanted to clarify that piece, and the public confidence component is absolutely essential. I mean, we've done a lot of work in this space, and you know, there is often, rightly or wrongly, in some of the case study work we've done, a perception on the part of the public that the fix is in between regulators and industry, and you know, anything that regulators do that could you know, alimenter, I can't think of the word in English, but that could intensify that concern, I would agree, is highly problematic. And, you know, certainly, again, our research really underscores that people can live with, I didn't get the decision I wanted at the end of the day, if they feel that the process was fair, was inclusive, considered their points of view, and has integrity. So I think, you know, I would just reiterate what you stated. My point is really about, you know, what I hear frequently from regulators is that there is a big gap between policy ambition and what's possible in the real worlds of energy. And so I think that's where my view on there is a lot of expertise in regulatory agencies, not for individual decisions, not in the, you know, all the stuff that you've laid out, that having more productive exchanges between policymakers and regulators in the development of policy could help us to avoid potentially some of the missteps that we're seeing. Hope that clarifies my position.
I think I said the P word, so I will, I'll expand on my thinking there. So I think with all due respect to the regulators in the room, I think, you know, we've heard loud and clear that there's a desire to learn and to be educated on what this energy transition is, what this might cost, how does this work in terms of the investments that are needing to be made today for utilities versus what's coming ahead. And so when I talk partnership, I completely agree. We must respect the process. We must respect the governance elements. We need to make sure that the process is one that can be trusted. And yes, from time to time, you do hear concerns around people wondering, what the relationship is between regulators and utilities. I don't think anyone in Alberta these days is thinking that there's some sort of inappropriate relationship between utilities and the regulator, but I know that it happens in other jurisdictions, and you hear that kind of feedback. I do think I would encourage regulators to think about how the staff is being educated. How is that? So I completely appreciate commissioners not sitting in the room with industry participants, 100%, totally get that. But you are relying on your teams, and you're hoping that they're bringing you, and able to get out on the record and through these proceedings all of the information you need to make, a holistic, fully informed decision. And so when I talk about partnering, that is what I mean. And what we see a lot of is more the inquiries. So 100% an actual proceeding wherein you're deciding, approving a facility or approving, a revenue application, totally get it. But when we're running inquiries, which is a common thing that we do here in Alberta, we're being asked to inform, and all the parties are, independent system operator, utilities, intervener groups, whomever, other experts, and the commission will hire their own experts as well, trying to learn, trying to educate. And I think that that's where a different type of partnership or model is required, because I'm not sure that people really fully understand. None of us in isolation fully understands how this whole thing works and how we can be most cost effective while hitting the mark. And so that's what I do think is really important. And I don't think that policymakers or regulators can do that on their own without a different conversation and openness from industry, who is closest to it.
Thank you. My name is Mark Colasar. I'm actually going to pull up a question that I wrote to the last panel, who actually talked about this theme, so I'm just going to read it out. As the cost burden of decarbonization flows through to electricity rates, and those who can afford to do so become less dependent on grid-supplied energy, that cost burden may be borne disproportionately by the customers who remain dependent on grid-supplied power. This outcome will exacerbate the energy affordability issue. Do we need to look at restructuring electricity rates so as to rebalance the share of that cost burden among those who are more or less reliant on grid-supplied power? So I'm getting to the point that we don't talk enough about what the rate impacts are going to be and how we're going to manage those. And I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that, because I think it's an important theme and one that we don't talk enough about. So.
Go ahead and we'll let you start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for that. I was just going to say that from what I'm seeing, I think some of those questions are being looked at by the regulators. So for example, if we look at the hearing at the AUC last year, and the system operators bulk and regional tariff redesign application, and one of the main issues in the hearing was exactly that, was whether we need to, I don't want to say reverse, but almost turn on its head the traditional cost allocation approach there. I wouldn't be surprised if the advent of DERs would cause a similar examination to take place in other jurisdictions, and I mean sooner than later, like probably in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think what I could add to that, for those of us who were here during CAMPUT, I think maybe it was the second presentation of the conference, we heard a lot about different rate options and what you're seeing happen in other jurisdictions. Mark, I think certainly as part of the transition, looking at different rate design and incentives, incentivizing certain behaviors and not penalizing others through rate options is an important tool in the toolkit. At some point, I think it becomes about, where do policymakers want to, what behaviors do they want to drive, and therefore, what do you actually put in place from a rate design perspective in order to either drive that or prevent certain behavior. But I see different rate design as an important part in the transition, yes.
So we have about one more question, one last question.
Yeah, I was going to say rock, paper, scissors it.
Thank you. I'll take it. My name is Victoria Bellissimo, and I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. I really appreciate the all-women panel. I believe it's called a WAML, and we should have a lot more of them going forward. Last year, we did a study, commissioned a study about behind-the-meter on-site solar, and solar currently serves about 1.5 terawatt hours, or 0.2% Canada's electricity use. To have a net zero grid in 2050, we need to get BTM solar to serve between 2 and 4%, which is 24 to 48 terawatt hours of Canada's electricity use. So my question for you is, on-site solar will be a long-term contributor to affordability, to our affordable solution. And are we set up for success right now to achieve that? And what do you think, if not, the number one barrier is for on-site solar?
So when you say on-site solar, can you just clarify?
Yeah, well, we refer to it sometimes as behind the meter.
Yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Yeah, so I can speak from an Ontario perspective. I think one of the challenges that exists right now in the regulatory framework is that net metering for behind the meter currently is allowed for the purpose of netting quantities, but if it's front of the meter, that's actually, it has different treatment. So I think what we need is consistent treatment for both behind the meter and front of the meter.
Yeah, and I'll maybe build on that, just a thought. I think that, if there is different treatment right now for behind the meter solar, that does not take care of the fact of, they're avoiding the distribution costs. And so that I think we need to think about that in terms of the overall rate design and how customers are paying for the existing system today. So, at this point in time, I'm not a big proponent of net metering because of the cost avoidance and then the pushing of those costs onto other customers. But I think we're challenged to meet the timelines, certainly, and I think we recognize what a contributor solar could be. In terms of what is the biggest thing, I think there's two things probably. Certainly just, process. Some would say investment, attracting investment. Others would argue that no, there's plenty of investment willing to come to Canada and different jurisdictions. So I'm not going to say investment, but I think just process, red tape. How do you get there quicker, faster in terms of, not having things like renewable pauses and all of those good things. But then I think from a technology perspective, as utilities, we need to be making sure that as these resources connect to our grid, we are actually able to operate them at scale, and that we're not impacting, first and foremost, the ability of the company that just invested or the homeowner that just invested, and their ability to export back onto the grid based on, elements of the technical side of how power flows and the reliability of our system, but then also just overall reliability of the system. And so I do think as utilities, we need to be preparing for solar at mass scale. And I know even within the ENMAX system here in the city of Calgary, as we've connected some larger distributed energy in recent years, it's definitely behaves different on our system. And so we need to make sure we're keeping up with that and that we're able to invest in the operational elements that are required for us to enable more and more of this. So investment, timelines for approvals.
And speaking of red tape and investments, for example, there's different regulatory treatment if you are the same owner of the load and the solar panel, and there are more stricter restrictions, if you will, under regulation if the panel is owned by a third party. So I think in terms of attracting more capital investment, again, this is specific to Ontario, I think if some of those regulations could be re-examined to allow for better investment flow, even in those third-party structured transactions, I think that would be really helpful too.
And at the break, I want to hear what you think, Victoria.
Yeah.
So I think we are at time. Thanks so much for your questions and for your attention, and thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.
Great.